Hello, welcome to SEAF and Ceed Second Global Leaders Talk. The first webinar was 2 weeks ago with Jeff Hoffman, co-founder of Booking.com or Priceline.com, and the recording of it is available on YouTube and on Ceed global website. He pointed to 3 ways how to lead through the storm: repurpose, retool, and redeploy. SEAF stands for Small Enterprise Assistance Funds, and it's an investment management group that provides growth capital and business assistance to small and medium enterprises, or SMEs, in emerging and transition markets underserved by traditional sources of capital. Ceed stands for Center for Entrepreneurship and Executive Development, and with 30 years of experience in SME investing, 40 plus SME investments, and 1,000 technical assistance interventions in frontier and emerging SMEs, SEAF is ultimately aware of the challenges entrepreneurs face managing their businesses. Ceed was created to address these challenges by enlisting successful entrepreneurs to share with and mentor those who are looking to grow their businesses. Ceed was developed using peer-to-peer model, where entrepreneurs would share their experiences, help each other to overcome challenges, learn from each other, and develop trust in others in the network. SEAF and Ceed together are in 35 countries in the world. Today, we'll discuss lessons from China, and our 2 guest speakers are BERT VAN DER VAART and George Zhang. We expect around 200 entrepreneurs all over the world joining this webinar today from 20 countries. We'll start with the interview, and after the interview, BERT will be available for questions.
Hi, good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening. This is the second in a series of global webinars which Ceed is organizing. My name is BERT VAN DER VAART, founder and CEO of SEAF. SEAF is an investment management firm, impact investment management firm that has invested throughout the emerging markets. One of the funds that we established and have managed is in Sichuan. It's the Sichuan Small Equity Investment Fund, and has been managed by George Zhang, who is with us today. I'm very happy that George is here to answer some questions, particularly with China having been first to undergo the coronavirus systems. How has that affected normal life, and particularly the life of entrepreneurs? So I'm very happy to introduce George Zhang. George has had a very good career working before, both in the early stages of China's move to the global economy. Has had important posts also with Standard Chartered Bank and New York Life International before he came to lead our fund in Sichuan. George, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. How are you?
Hey, good. Thanks, Bert. How are you? Hello, everybody.
Fantastic. George, we're very interested in hearing how China had to deal with it when the outbreak of the coronavirus was determined in January, and particularly what was the beginning, what was the middle, the end, and of course, where are you now? And if possible, could you focus on how entrepreneurs had to deal with this situation?
Okay. Thanks for inviting me, and it's an honor to address the situation of China's coronavirus containment and share lessons and experiences, particularly related to enterprises and SMEs we invested as investment arm of SEAF in China.
Around 6 weeks, well, including even January 25th, because were people told not to travel in January to their villages and to their fathers and mothers' homes for Spring Festival? How was that?
Yes, yeah. People were told not go out, not to travel, not to have get together, and all restaurants, coffee shops, were closed. Yeah. And you cannot enter or leave each building or enclosed area. Yeah. So that against the regulation, you will be sentenced at least for 15 days in prison or 6 years at the most.
Yeah, and so that lasted about 6 weeks. Is that correct? I mean, as I recall, during that period of time, there was a lot of work done remotely through internet and computer, but you had to stay in your homes for almost 6 weeks. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, yeah, more than that even. Yeah. So I think, well, situation has been turned positive in mid or end of March. Yeah.
Right.
So, you know, so at that time, government was eager to call resumption of production and business. Yeah.
Yes, of course. Yes. How was activity from some of the companies that you know, Futian or Bang Bang Wall? How did those companies working? They were also shut down for those 6 weeks?
Oh yes, absolutely. So every building, every plant, workshops, yeah. So the factories were, you know, shut down or locked down. Yeah. So no entry, you know, no, you know, people, workers, staffs to work inside. Yeah. For us, yeah, we cannot go into our office building. Same thing. So the business actually, well, for those portfolio companies were affected for them 6 weeks or even over 6 weeks. So there's no delivery of goods. So so they have to store those goods in warehouse and no factories, no, you know, partners to accept or receive your goods. So revenues were reduced by 2/3 for that almost 2 months. We checked with Futian. They said they only got like 7 million revenue compared, you know, 30 million before for the season for the quarter.
Exactly.
For that time.
And were there, when you were in your apartments, were there e-commerce? Was Alibaba delivering, or did you? How were you able to buy food? And was there any other kind of e-commerce during that period of time?
That's very interesting. So yes, those internet companies or business actually were positively, you know, increased with the business and. So online, you know, for course they have online trials for you know, food delivery, for post delivery, for anything daily life necessities. Well, they make deliveries online or purchase them online and deliver them by those Alibaba people. Only they can be allowed to go into each building, including communities, and only the government. Staff or district government staff can, you know, be allowed to go into the communities, you know, the houses.
Now, what happened? I know after 6 weeks, 8 weeks, something like that, some of our companies in other countries that were sourcing from China were being told, okay, you'll be receiving goods again. So, you know, after 6, 7, 8 weeks, how did commercial operations begin again when you were talking about March, when things were beginning to normalize a bit? Was this every day they were working? Was it just staggered? How did business resume when you got past the worst of this?
Yeah, so the business and production or activities were gradually resumed. Well, from maybe mid or end of March, you know, they will resume work or production business partially, than some to fully. Like those state-owned enterprises, they were ordered to have their production or operations fully. But still, you know, local governments have some different you know, policies to try to prevent you know, people, or to try to, you know, keep the situation not to you know, return to that, you know, outbreak situation. So so I think or from you know the reporting, still, I think 80% now for enterprises or those production in some industries were resumed. Yeah. But still, well, like travel, like hotels, cinemas, cultural, sporting, well, those were industries. Real estate were not fully resumed.
Yeah. How about restaurants? Are restaurants operating again?
Restaurants partially opened, but still people are vigilant to go to a restaurant if there are crowd of people. So I went to a restaurant because we work well on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So I went to the restaurant to have lunch, but still there are many people. So I have to choose a table outside the restaurant and showing very tough face to others, and I took that table by myself.
You were isolated. Okay. So, no, but I think that's an interesting thing that you're saying. You were working even today, Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the office, and then Tuesday, Thursday, you'll probably be working at home. Is that what's the thinking behind that? Why are they staggering that kind of work schedule?
There are still those, frightening news about the non-symptom infected people, and also those people who returned from overseas, and those people who now released from Hubei and Wuhan. And Sichuan, has one time, over 50,000 people from Wuhan to return to Chengdu. And the expert actually expected that or predicted maybe 1/3 of them, but I don't know if it's rumor or not, could be those non-symptom infected person. So I have to care about the staff's, health and the lives. So, and also the district governments required, still, they did not release them 7 requirements for us. They say if there's some, infected case, and your company, you will be responsible for that fully, and maybe you will be sentenced in prison for that. So, that's why I took compromising, way of having people in the office, our staff.
So that's your decision. That's your decision based upon having to determine to what extent you could be held liable for infection. So it's a careful way of getting back to work, and luckily everyone is healthy. Is that right?
Yes. So everyone, our company, our staff is quite healthy and okay, and even in the office we wear masks. But for this video, I took off my mask. Still here.
You want to put it on? Very, very good. How do you think businesses are going to resume? I know obviously for export, the industries. I know one of our companies in Colombia and Guatemala are receiving everything they ordered for with lithium batteries for solar operations, as well as some engineered products. So that obviously was important, and what they're reporting is that everything is back to normal. But for industries like sports and hotels and tourism, and of course Chinese tourism was a huge business before coronavirus. How do you think those businesses are going to come back, and what kind of changes more generally are you hearing from your portfolio companies or from other people in the country? What are businessmen going to be doing in the next year or so that may have changed because of this COVID crisis?
So for those industry which can be easily resumed, so the government has required those industries or companies in those industries to fully resume their business. But for those industries which were sensitive to this disease, will be gradually and partially resumed. We heard about a reporting from some well-known, scenic spots or sceneries, still they allow visitors to visit those sceneries, but they limit the number of visitors each day, and they will keep those visitors distance. Ask them not to walk very closely like that. And they have to wear masks. They have to wash their hands. They have to use tissue to press down, press button of the lift, press door button, etc. So it's still in a very protective way for those visitors to do that. For sporting, we didn't hear any sport events to take place. And also including cinemas. Nobody to go to cinemas. Cinemas were closed. Those entertainment companies were closed still fully, including karaoke, everything of entertainment companies, cultural.
What about Starbucks? Is Starbucks closed?
Starbucks opened, but only allow people to go one after another.
Is travel like airplanes within China, or is that resuming business, or are airlines also?
No, that's still a disaster. No, so only those planes to take the overseas Chinese students, they were flying. So but for domestic ones, they were still limited. So but the trains were resumed. To some extent. But one people can only sit on one seat, still keep distance, wearing mask. So maybe so in that way,
So everybody's first class now. Okay.
Yes. Even for migrant workers, they will be they were sent to their working factories by planes. So they sit on one seat, and everything is free. So government pay those airplane ticket for them. So they say, this is my first time in my life to take a plane. Some migrant worker from countryside. It's so fast, several hours. I slept. I dozed off a little bit. I arrived.
Exactly. They're back that way. Amazing. So what's the thinking? I mean, is e-commerce going to be even more important? Are small shops going to die? I mean, what kind of thinking have you been reading about or seeing or even hearing from your portfolio companies? What do you think the future is going to be like for small businesses and SMEs in China?
Okay, definitely this COVID-19 virus will have an in-depth impact on economy, on commerce, not only in China but also globally. And people all think that this is a black swan significant event. So really affecting people's life and business, and even environment and trends in the long term, maybe 2 years. But still, the small SMEs, or including small business, the commerce and restaurants, we were not that pessimistic about them. Even though the internet company with online business will be thriving, more thriving than before. But those small restaurants, small business were still worse to be existed. And they will keep alive. Because this is affected by this disease. So after this disease is wiped out, so everything, including business of these SMEs, will significantly rebound. People think in that way, including us. So because this is not affected by like economic crisis or political crisis or war.
Yeah.
These are just epidemic. So after it's wiped out by human being together, then there is a significant rebound of everything. So we are still confident. Even those small restaurants now were open. In China. But still they put the tables in distance. So like before you can hold 50 people in the lobby, but now maybe 15 or 10 people, 20 people in
exactly.
to keep their business going.
So that's all very, very interesting. What about bank debts? I mean, there was a significant amount of let's say companies that owed money to banks, and if they're shut down for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, it makes it difficult to repay. Did the government give any relief for bank debts, or how do you think the amount of finance in the amount that has been borrowed, how is that going to work out in China?
Absolutely. So the government has conducted a series preferential policies and treatment to the enterprises and industries affected by this COVID-19. So first they extend the loans and reduce the interest for those companies to be which have been affected. So also they offer preferential tax policies and treatment to them by reducing or waiving personal income tax and VAT. So periodic VAT reduction or waiving or exemption were offered, particularly to SMEs. So those 5 insurance and 1 fund like pension, medical insurance, casualty, unemployment insurance, which have to be paid by companies mandatorily, were waived for 3 months. So also the government has taken a serious those fiscal supportive policies. So they will issue special treasury bonds, local government bonds to ensure liquidity, which will total like in 4 trillion. Predicted by experts. So the Chinese government has only 3% deficit rate, which is compared with 7% in Japan, 4% in the US. So the Chinese government want to exceed than 3% by issuing a lot of debts. I mean bonds. So far they have issued 1.08 trillion bonds. So they will continue to issue bonds to improve the liquidity. So also they have to relax the currency policy by cutting the financial institutions' reserve ratio, and they have cut it twice, each by 0.5%, total 1%, and also they cut the excess deposit rate, reserve rate, from 0.75% to 0.35%. I remember. And also they cut the SME bank reserve ratio by 0.5%. So they took both the financial fiscal policy, also currency policy, to try to improve this financial environment, try to reduce the financial burden of the companies and industries.
Interesting. That's going to be a big factor, obviously, as well. And there's no inflation you're seeing. I mean, prices are still stable. What are you seeing?
So far, no, actually, because we observed the Spring Festival. The price at that time was the highest. The people rush to purchase daily life food and the necessities, which pushed up the price. But now it's reduced a little bit compared with that peak period price. But we predicted, or experts will predict, that there will be inflation in the latter, part of period, in the mid of this year or end of this year or even next year, because well, a lot of bonds money, was issued by the central government, like 4 trillion.
They make sense. George, I don't know whether you've got any. I know we're running out of time. Do you have any either highlights, lessons learned from some of the portfolio companies that that they're benefited, or what have they gotten out of this crisis in terms of their operation that might be better? Put them in a stronger position in the future. Is, for example, healthy foods from Huiji, is there a demand for healthy foods versus less healthy foods? I don't know. That's a question. And I guess the other notion that might be interesting to our listeners is, to what extent did companies reduce the number of employees quickly, or were they able to more or less keep employees at the levels that they were before COVID began?
Yes, this is a sensitive issue, Bert. So definitely those companies were affected to some extent by these COVID-19 events. So it's hard for them to make decision to lay off many workers. But maybe they try to keep every staff, every worker, every employee, because it's hard to find out the technical workers or skilled workers for them. And the government has given subsidy to those companies who will keep the employees and workers. Like 1,000 RMB per person. If you didn't lay off workers. So, but we don't know. We don't know the real economic situation to be developed later on in the future. So if things were getting worse in the future, so it could be, workers will be reduced a little bit, or they will temporarily, terminate their contract and ask them to go home and give them some basic money. And when the situation has been improved, they will ask them to come back to the factories. So those are usually the measures they take to keep workers. But so far we did not hear a lot of those were laid off. By companies.
Very good. It makes sense. Well, I don't know, George. What lessons at the end of the day, whether from some of our companies like Huiji or Futian, I mean, these are all in different industries that are in a supply chain. What kind of lessons can you say maybe they've learned? Well, was there anything that's good that's come out of all this crisis? What do you think?
Okay, they really have to make their orders in a very rational way, and they will really judge the demand than to decide their production and the storage. So also they may well have to judge and improve their business plan, their strategy in the future. Because of this virus events. So I think for lessons, first they will have to strategically predict those factors which will affect the business and the production, like order management, like supply production management. And also they will predict those logistic costs. If the isolation management was still in place, you cannot visit your customers or partners. Like Futian, their marketing people, salespeople were not allowed to go to the iron and steel companies. They don't allow them to enter the factory. So there's no negotiations, there's no contract signing. So you have to predict that logistics risk. And also you have to think about those risks, which can be categorized financial risk, which you have to reduce cost, not to keep that very heavy, storage or warehouse, and you have to be care about the HR risk, that is to keep the employment, and you have to vigilant about the legal risk, because if you did not follow the government, maybe those new regulations, they can be promulgated at any time, and if you breach them, then you will be punished very significantly. So and even in prison. So those are all lessons, and for our portfolio companies to think about.
Well, it seems like management got a little harder, and people have to work a little harder, be more careful, maybe reduce a bit amount the inventory, and maybe be a little bit closer, if you can be closer to the market. These are important lessons that even though a lot of that is going to be with, I think, established partners, right? Because you can't visit new people. You have to work with Zoom calls with people that I assume, right? Those kinds of things that we are seeing in other countries. So, George, these are very fascinating insights. We really appreciate your sharing them. I mean, I know there will be entrepreneurs from probably 20 countries that are going to be watching this. I want to congratulate you, Siegfried, the office, obviously your families, for getting through this difficult period of time. We really appreciate your also sharing these lessons with us in Washington. It is truly a global pandemic, and I think as you stated, I think we all have to work together to make the best out of this, and to deal with the risks going forward. So thank you so much for your time, George, and for your comments.
Thanks a lot, Bert. Thanks a lot, Joanne and Brianna. Actually, so we wanted to our lessons and experience in China will be useful and informative to our colleagues and entrepreneurs in those 20 countries. And I wish all of you healthy and safe, and we will work together. And I think this is global economy and in the global environment, and we can prevent from this disease, combat this disease together. And I believe that firmly.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Very good, George. Very good. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed the interview with George Zhang on the lessons from China as part of the SEAF and Ceed Global Leaders Talk. Thank you also for answering the poll. As you can see from the poll, we have entrepreneurs from more than 20 countries, and most of them are micro and small businesses or enterprises. Today, we are lucky to be joined by BERT, who is ready to answer your questions. BERT, you personally have more than 30 plus years in working with SMEs all over the world. And you also are part of our investment committee of SEAF's investment fund in Chengdu. And you know the challenges of these Chinese companies before, during, and towards the end, if we can say we are almost toward the end of the COVID-19 crisis in China. So let's start with the questions. The first question is coming from Slovenia. So please ask the question.
Hi, I'm Alia from Ceed, Slovenia. And within our community, we've been talking regularly about sales. We have regular sales weekly meetups. And how we can adjust to sales and marketing within this crisis. And our question is related to that. So can you share more, how has the consumer behavior changed, compared to before the COVID-19? And what do people buy differently today than before?
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's obviously a very important question, how behavior changes short term during the crisis as well as longer term. This is, it's still of course, subject to change. There have been some second waves, there's been some restrictions, but in general, as you heard from George, the consumers have become much more cautious. They have been spending more time online. That doesn't necessarily mean they've been buying more, but they've been certainly buying online. I think the consumer behavior in terms of going out to seeing sporting events, to going to restaurants, that's been a big change. And there's a lot of speculation as to how quickly that will come back. You can see what George is, I don't know how many restaurants, he was, I think, saying around a third of the restaurants are expected to close. You know, and even the ones that are open, they will be both pickup on the fast food side and more expensive because the tables are going to have to be, if you're looking at the rent you're paying, if you're going to be able to now put 6 feet of distance between you and the next person, that's clearly down. Sporting events, entertainment, these things are down. Tourism is down. So people will have more money. I mean, I think what we can certainly expect is that they will shift towards a healthier lifestyle, greater resilience. I think there's some expectation of, I mean, the Chinese already save an enormous amount of money at any rate. I don't know how that's going to play out in the United States, where people don't save that much money, or Europe, where sort of in between. But I think that the preliminary experience, anyway, in China has been caution. It's been being more careful. I think maybe spending more time thinking, less impulse buy, more thinking about what it is that they need. We are also seeing in some other countries people buying stuff to improve their home. I mean, obviously, if you've been trapped in your house, you realize the projects that need to happen. And the final thing, and this is kind of interesting overall, SEAF, what we're seeing is that people have been delaying purchasing of clothes, of elective health, of a lot of things, in part that were in the past associated with how you look like in front of other people. You know, dentistry is down, certainly barbers are down, you know, people have been cutting hair at home. I mean, you know, which is, so I think this is at some level reflecting the uncertainty people have, another level reflecting the fact that it's harder to go to the malls and see what you can buy, etc. There's been a lot on the entrepreneurs who've been trying to, of course, supply from their inventory. So inventory levels where possible have been drawn down a little bit. So that I think is a preliminary answer. The longer term answer, you know, is it a long term? Is it a generational? Is it a couple of years? Nobody knows. I think we all have been seeing information that would suggest that people are going to be cautious going back in. There's still a fear that there will be a second wave. There clearly is higher debt that people have had to at some level assume. And I think that there will be probably in terms of travel and even supply chain, a greater desire to be closer to home, where the distances and where even if you pay a little bit of extra, there's this theme of resilience coming up. So I think those are all logical. Certainly, I don't think you're going to see a V-shaped kind of boom. I think that it'll be a much more gradual boom. This is what we're seeing. Don't know if that's responsive.
No, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you, Alia. Slovenia. Second question is coming from Macedonia. Please go ahead and ask the question.
Hello, my name is Biljana from Ceed, Macedonia. Hello, Bert.
Hi, Biljana.
According to your opinion, what is the biggest challenge when the pandemic ends? I mean, the global impact of the business.
You know, obviously, we all hope the pandemic will end.
Yes.
So I think we'll start with that. I think mankind has been very resilient in the past. I think, in my opinion, there's going to be a huge debt overhang. You know, a lot of the banks have just pushed out the debt. Sometimes they have given grace on the principal repayment, and I think they're doing what they can. But we are really worried that we're going to get into the national debt levels have been very high at any rate. If you look at countries like the United States or even Colombia, how they are able to pay temporary subsidies for payroll, for subsidies on food. It means that there's going to be a lot less fiscal room in the governments. It means that there's going to be a big fight between raising taxes at a very time when, in fact, the economies need growth and taxes will be negative. The other issue with banks is that if the crisis is solved, are they going to try to collect and make the companies pay when those companies need capital, working capital, whatever, even to grow? So I think growth is going to be challenged because people are really going to be faced with the governments on one level will need to tax, banks will need to collect, and at the same time, consumers will be, as I've just mentioned to Alia, likely to be a little bit slower coming back. So we'll see subdued growth and we will see the needs. I do think there's going to be a big need for equity. And then, of course, we're going to have transition in various different sectors. There's going to be a number of sectors. We're talking about people-intensive sectors, cosmetologies. We've got some cosmetic companies, for example, in the Philippines. They were growing very, very strong, and now sales are exclusively online rather. But you know, if you're home, you're not going to need cosmetics so much. So, I mean, there's a whole lot of the discretionary sectors are not going, whereas the ones like specialized, like supermarkets, have been going great. The pharmacies, we will expect to see a rebound in health. We expect more digital marketing. We see obviously a big demand on the internet and communications. Supply chain in general, there's going to be a lot of need for being efficient on agribusiness. And then these resilience themes. But then if you look at gyms, or if you look at tourism, if you look at restaurants, if you look at hotels, if you look at any kind of entertainments, those industries are not going to bounce back very rapidly. And I think there's going to be a residual degree of caution, as well as then the lack of discretionary money. I think it's going to be a challenge to adjust, to transition those around. And I also think that supply chains, I think George is correct, that China will do everything they can to restore faith and trust in the viability of China-led supply chains. But I think what I've been seeing in Central America or in the Maghreb is a lot of interest in reducing the distance away from major markets like Europe or the United States to move over some production, some greater amount of production and manufacturing in places like the Maghreb, Turkey, the Balkans. Certainly, I would expect the same in Central America, where labor costs are maybe much more expensive than China, but still very much less than in the Netherlands or in Germany. There is, I think, a likely shift over to regional businesses, and how that's going to develop. It will be a great opportunity, but it will be a big, then we look at the equity and then the needs on the finance side to make those shifts over. And I think those will be challenges.
Thank you so much.
Sure, great.
Thank you, Biljana. Thank you, Bert. We're going to the next question coming from Kosovo. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Jovan. Hi all, hi Bert. Nice being with you today and hearing you.
Yes.
My name is Kreshnik, for those that don't know me. Kreshnik Leshi, from Director of Ceed Kosovo. And I could count more than 20 attendants from Kosovo today in today's webinar. Bert, since you are also in a world of investments, I picked from a bunch of questions from Kosovo. I picked one related to investment. And more they want to know about the climate investment during this time of crisis. And under question is, should we invest or buy some shares in the companies now, or wait a bit longer?
Well, it's a great question, which, you know, if asking me a question like that and 25 cents gets you a cup of coffee. So I don't know how much, I don't know whether I would say that anybody has brilliant knowledge in this. What I can say is that there are a number of industries, and therefore stock that you could buy with those industries, that have had certainly a building up of demand. I mean, if you look at hospitals, we have hospitals in Kosovo and in Albania, in fact, and we see that a lot of elective surgery has been delayed because people, in fact, weirdly, those hospitals are not doing so well because the COVID people are being treated, and those who don't have COVID are staying away, even if you should be in for an elective surgery, etc. So there's a backlog of needs that will come in, and most people will expect that health companies, whether pharmacies, whether hospitals, whether medical devices, there will be a rebound. And so if those stocks have been damaged by investor sentiment, you could expect to see a rebound there. Now, there are other people who say, well, airline stocks, they're way down. Now I should buy airline stocks. I'm a little bit less bullish on that, because clearly that presupposes that the kind of demand for those airlines afterwards would be equal to what they were before, or would grow rapidly. And I don't know whether I would agree with that. I think, you know, we have to look at that rebound, the sectors and the stocks that people are interested in buying in. There's no doubt that there will be a rebound, but I think there's still a lot of uncertainty in the situation. So if you're going to put your family's fortune in it, I think you would want to be quite careful. Even there are other people saying, well, maybe banks, we should go into financial institutions who are going to rebound with the economy. But I think there's a lot of interesting data that would suppose that people are going to non-bank financial institutions using fintech, that there will be a shift out of banks, which frankly, even before COVID, were losing market share to people who are working online, or were trying to get a better comparison rates over what your mortgage rates would be, et cetera. So I think fintech will probably be continuing in the right way. It'll be a more efficient way of bringing money to bear. So I think, you know, I would be very cautious again to say that if you don't invest now, you're going to miss a tremendous upswing. I think it's probably correct that you know, with the kind of declines in stock markets globally, that there are good opportunities to buy, but you know, the majority of people, and this may be why you were able to see stocks as low, the majority of people are sitting on cash, and they're sitting on cash until it becomes a little clearer what is going to happen. Always the issue, if you're ahead of the crowd, you may make a lot of money, but you may also be by yourself. So I think I would say be cautious. Look at those industries that have to have, you know, agribusiness, supermarkets. What are people, you know, going to have to buy regardless? And if you believe very much in the rebound, then buying now is a good thing. I think there will be people, there will be buying opportunities over the next 3 months. I think there's things will still trickle out. So I don't think you have to rush back in. I don't know whether that's helpful. And again, as I say, if you want better advice, you should probably invest in Warren Buffett. But this is what I've been seeing in our various countries, and what we're hearing here in the United States.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kreshnik. Thank you, Bert. We are moving to the fourth question coming from Tunisia. Please go ahead and ask the question.
Hello.
Hi, Sonia.
Thank you, Jovan. Hi, Bert. My name is Sonia, and I'm from Ceed, Tunisia. So here is a question for you, Bert, from Tunisia. After the oil prices have recently dipped below zero for the first time in history, what are your short to medium-term predictions for the global economy?
Well, this is a huge issue, and this was happening even without COVID, when we had the Russia and Saudi kind of price war, which was already, I think, reflecting impatience with the global recovery and the need, I think, for countries like Russia to pump oil. But what we've seen the last 2 or 3 days with oil now going negative, because effectively people can't find places to store the oil, and so they're paying people to take the oil off. It's unprecedented, and I think it's extremely worrying. I think we can look at COVID for a large part of that. Clearly, a lot of people have worked at home. Commercial real estate, I think, is not ever going to be the way it was. Travel, way down. The airports are closed. So all those issues where enormous amounts of fossil fuel were being used before, those have been for many weeks now without. 2 or 3 things I think we can say about this. One, fossil fuel being as inexpensive as it is, it's going to, I think, delay the further expansion of renewable energy. That is to say, while solar energy has been going down in price, it's hard to beat zero. So, you know, obviously we're fossil fuels. There will be a rebound. I think people will restart the factories. But I think that the gradual rebound in the economy will keep oil prices low for the next 2-3 years for sure. I think that's probably good news for the economy, even though there are some people who would say, well, you know, this is causing a change in wealth effects. It's causing a change in demand. But given what I was saying a little bit earlier, low interest rates, the need for governments to pull in tax, excess of debt everywhere. If oil prices were to rebound rapidly, that would really damage the economy. So I think that the good news is, one of the few good news is that ultimately energy prices will look to be stable. That will allow manufacturing, even in countries where oil and energies were taxed at a higher level than in those that were not. They will allow a more balanced recovery on the manufacturing side. It will probably reduce some discretionary spending and investment from the large oil companies. I think Saudi Arabia clearly has already been, over the last year or two, reducing some of its grant-based activities, moving more to a sovereign investment kind of posture. We've seen that in Jordan. We've seen this in a number of other countries. But I think that's a good question in the sense that while everybody's been focusing on COVID, there's been a massive game up being placed on the energy side, and it is still too early to tell. But I think there will probably be a gradual recovery in the fossil fuel markets. I think people will learn to live with that and adjust. But yeah, it's a big issue. So
thank you.
Sure, thank you, Sonia. The fifth question is coming from Tanzania. So please go ahead and pose the question.
Hi, this is Fred from Tanzania.
Hi, Fred.
Hi, yeah, I think one of the things that keeps coming up is because we have tons and tons of trade between us and China. So the main question is, what's your feeling on how things might come back to near normal? In best case scenario, yeah, that's about it.
China clearly is coming out of this with every intention to try to restore its traditional export industries and to restore its reputation as a reliable supplier. I think some people would say even, and I think George mentioned, the state-owned enterprises were forced to go back to work earlier than the private sector enterprises in order to feed the export demand. I think China is very aware of that reputation. Having said that, you will probably have read in the news, Japan has been trying to encourage many of its companies to locate, or at least partially locate, some of their manufacturing operations outside of China, whether in Vietnam, whether in Japan, whether in other countries in the region. And as I mentioned to you a little earlier, we're also finding in the United States and in Europe interest in at least diversifying the supply chain. So I think that there will be regional supply chains. There will be, I think, good opportunities for countries like Turkey or like the Balkan countries or like the Central American countries or Maghreb, countries that are close to major markets and have the engineering talent, etc. They may be a little bit more expensive, but I think that for resilience purposes, it would be very prudent for many of the larger companies, whether on the agri side or on the manufacturing side, to have at least a diversified supply chain, and that would include mean a reduced reliance on China. So as much as China would like to bring everything back to normal, I think that's going to be very difficult. Of course, every country is different, but by the same token, I don't know what that's going to be on resources. I mean, Tanzania has been a little bit cursed ever since they found that great big gas and oil reserve off the side of the country. We haven't been able to use it too much. So I think that a lot of that gas is still going to be in the ground for a while longer. But we are, I think, likely to see gradual recoveries. I think that the regional economics will be very interesting to see what's going to happen with the South African nations, whether trade is going to increase a little bit. Of course, it won't be a substitute for what was going on with China before, but I think that every nation is going to be a little bit scared to put themselves in that kind of position of dependency again. So I think that there will be regional adjustments. I think there will be probably a slower recovery as a result of that, but I think a lot of people will put greater stock on the resilience and the need to diversify the supply chains. That could be good news for SMEs, frankly, because it means that the major multinationals are not going to dominate. There will be a room for middle-sized businesses, and for, as we know from our SMEs, that tend to be disproportionately locally sourcing or locally supplying. So I think we expect to see some of that, and then of course there will be a need to bring in technology to make sure that that production will be as efficient as possible. What the governments are going to do, I mean, you've got a government that I won't say anything about, but what the governments are going to do, you know, in terms of either banking or taxes or making more efficient new businesses, I think that's going to be a big factor as well. And I very much hope, and I see this in the Caribbean countries, for example, there is a newfound understanding that the private sector has to play a bigger role because the government simply can't. Maybe that'll be the case in East Africa as well, but let's hope.
Thank you, Fred. Well, the 1 hour already passed, and I think we are going to wrap up here. Thanks a lot, Bert, for conducting the interview with George and for being with us today. Please be informed for the audience that the recording of this video will be sent to the people that were present at participants in this event. With this, I really want to wrap up and close the SEAF and Ceed Global Leaders Talk on lessons from China. Have a great day and safe rest of the day.
Terrific.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you
very good. Thank you very much.
And see you in 2 weeks. As the series of SEED and SEAF Leaders Talk will continue every 2 weeks. So our next one is scheduled for 2 weeks from now. 2 weeks. So 2 Wednesdays from now.
Perfect. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.